companies to better send SMS messages en masse and organize that and provide that as a support solution. And we also have Amazon Web Services, who I probably don't need to introduce, but I will anyway. They are the data infrastructure of much of the internet and much of cloud services here today. So that's who we've got, but they will get a chance to introduce themselves as well. So that's what the gist of today is, but let's go straight to the agenda. So first we will allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves in a better way than I can, followed by looking at the state of the world, just taking a step back at what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the world that's allowing these shifts in how companies are using technology to grow their businesses, essentially. And then we'll dive into the SimpleTexting use case. So the SimpleTexting are using each of our services in such a fluid way that we just want to give them a spotlight as to how they use AWS, Heap, and Intercom together to drive these amazing customer experiences. And that's what we're all here for today, I suppose, in a nutshell. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So if you have plenty of burning questions, feel free to ask them in the chat feature. And we'll be using the chat over the Q&A. Feel free to interact in there as well. Regina, my colleague, will be in there to gather all your questions, and we will hopefully get to all of them by the end of the webinar. The webinar will be roughly 40 minutes long, and then we'll cover the Q&A for the remaining 10 to 15 minutes. Cool. So, and we are recording this session. So if you have registered, not trying to encourage you to leave anytime soon, but if you do need to leave, we will send you the recording after the webinar as well. So without further ado, straight into our panelists. So here we have Sean Griffith, who is the Chief COO of SimpleTexting. We have Larry Geller from Amazon Web Services, who serves as the global segment lead for the digital customer experience. Travis Benson, a solutions consultant for Heap, and myself, Liam Keegan. I'm a lifecycle marketer here at Intercom. So I'm just going to pass it over to you guys to briefly introduce yourselves and your company as well and what you do. Beginning with you, Sean, at SimpleTexting.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Liam, for the introduction and for having us all here today. Something that's near and dear to our heart, sort of the customer experience journey overall. So as a company, we provide a platform that allows businesses to communicate with their audience via texting, which we think is one of the most convenient channels to really get a message across. We work with businesses of all sizes, very small SMBs to large enterprises. And the key here is that we give them the ability to send mass messages to whoever their audience is, whether that's sort of internal or marketing, a number of different use cases, and then carry on the conversation in a really personal one-to-one way, which sort of sets us apart from some others. We like to think about it as sort of the universal inbox, right? Most people have a phone, and every phone comes with texting on it. So it's a great way to deliver messages.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Next, we have Larry from Amazon Web Services. Would you be able to give us a brief overview of how Amazon Web Services is powering this new digital customer experience, Larry?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity today. So I'm Larry Geller with Amazon Web Services, the world's leading global cloud provider. I run the global segment for digital customer experience. And what that means is working with great partners like we have today, jointly building solutions to unlock customer value with these digital experiences.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Larry. And next up, Travis, would you be able to give us a quick, brief overview of how Heap is contributing to this, this new and modern way of providing customer experiences?
Absolutely. Thanks, Liam. Thanks for everybody hopping on the call. Super excited to talk about the SimpleTexting use cases and the Heap platform. So long story short, Heap is basically a product analytics or digital analytics platform that is kind of in this new wave or paradigm shift in the terms of way that people do analytics. We have invented this technology called auto capture that basically collects every interaction that's happening on your web page without you having to do upfront dev work. And then we give you a visualization layer to actually unlock the power of that data. And in this use case, you'll see Sean talk about how he uses segments that he's built in Heap and actually powers his business with those segments. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. And last but not least, I will speak a little bit to Intercom as well, and how we contribute to this new and modern way of providing digital customer experiences. The way you can see Intercom from a customer communication point of view is twofold. There is the engagement piece and also the support piece. At its core, Intercom is a tool to allow you to speak to customers where they are, however they want to be wherever they want to be spoken to, right time, right place. But on top of that, there's the messaging layer. And so you have Amazon Web Services and you have Heap providing you the data and providing you the insights. Intercom is what allows you to turn those insights into deliverables and to deliver them to the channels to your customers so that they can get that end experience. But I won't speak too much about Intercom because there will be more about this once we get into the simple texting use case as well, in terms of how all these pieces work together. But at a very high level, AWS, like any cloud, I suppose, storage platform, it's the underlying data infrastructure that surfaces that data to you when you need and scales with you as you grow very efficiently. And then in Heap is that layer that allows you then turn that data and that behavior on your website into actionable insights, create those specific audiences and segments to learn more about your prospects and customers over time, and to get really sophisticated about how you learn about your customers. And then finally, Intercom is the action piece where you can deliver the right message to the right person at the right time, maximizing the business impact while also creating a personalized and delightful customer experience. Cool, but we'll speak more to that and speak to it more practically, should I say, once we get into the case study with Sean and SimpleTexting. Cool. So my slides just skipped ahead. So before digging into that use case, I'd love to pick our panelists' brains on some of the recent developments in this space, and just to bring forward some of those insights about where I guess the industry is going and what we're seeing our customers do and what we're seeing our own companies do as well. So at a high level, I'm going to ask each of you, what do you see happening in the industry that's motivating the changes that we see in how businesses manage and use data, drive real granular based behavior customer experiences, and how they're using services like AWS, Heap, and Intercom to foster this modern way of growing a business. So first, I'll ask you, Sean, what is it that you're seeing from your point of view at SimpleTexting in the world of SMS across B2B and B2C? What are the trends that are kind of driving growth in your sector?
Yeah, so for us, we know that the way that we need to communicate with people is changing, and I think this has been accelerated over the last 2 years, probably more than ever, right? It's just harder to reach people than it ever has been, and it's probably more important now that we're reaching them, in the way that they want to be reached, right, in a way that's very quick and efficient. We think about it as sort of this tectonic shift that's happened, especially in marketing, right? There's a lot of things that have contributed to it, with the prominence of ad blockers, email open rates declining, social channels just don't work the same way as they have in the past. The second piece we see is really sort of first-party data matters more than it ever has before. And texting is this sort of really nice, clean opt-in channel, for the most part. So you end up, communicating with people that want to receive your message. So at least at much higher open rates, right? We see text messaging, see open rates of about 98% in a lot of cases, which is just astronomical compared to a lot of other channels. So we see a lot of adoption of texting now, just across the board.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that, Sean. And I can't wait to learn more about how you go about providing this experience to your customers so they can discover the value of your service. Next up, we have Amazon Web Services. And Larry, I'd love to understand more about, because Amazon has such a breadth and drives such, I think, about 35% of all cloud services on the internet. You must be able to take such a medium and long-term view as to the shifts that you're seeing happening in the industry and in the universe. So I guess what do you see happening? What are the trends that you see that are driving evolution and change in this space.
Great, thank you for the question. But I definitely want to address Sean's comment about the power of texting. I have 3 teenage kids, and the only way I actually can reach them is through texting. And I think texting really, in terms of channels, it really demonstrates the power of real time, that in the moment of experience, which has really become the expectations for people, not just personalization, but personalization and real time. So I think one of the things you hit on earlier is about the explosion of first-party data. The deprecation of third-party cookies is driving this first-party data explosion. But not only is it the amount of data, but the ability to discern it. At AWS, we look very carefully at this explosion of data and how to take the data and make it real time. Our partners here today have done a great job at the application layer. But if I look from data decision to application, the interplay between AWS and our partners allows us to drive that real-time experience to that moment of experience. The other thing we see is a tremendous revolution. If you look across the marketing technology landscape, many tools historically have been rules-based for decisioning. The rise of AI and machine learning allows us with our partners to unlock customer value by not only offering in-the-moment experiences, but also the discernment and prediction that machine learning offers. So together with our partners, we can unlock this real-time personalized experience that is curated at the moment of open.
That's fascinating, Larry, particularly that AI ML piece, which is very much a trend that we're seeing at Intercom as well, in terms of just evolving how we understand customer data and what we can do with it to evolve how we can deliver new products to our customers, how we can deliver AI to them so that they can then provide their end users with a more advanced experience as well. So the knock-on effect there is massive, and we see that at Intercom as well. Thank you very much, Larry, for those trends. I think they're really insightful. And then before I talk a little bit more to Intercom, Travis, on Heap, understanding your visitor data and your customer data, how they interact with your product and your websites, how this information drives like go-to-market decision making and product development as well. What are some of the developments that you've seen in this space over the last couple of years that you found particularly, I guess, outstanding or new in this space?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the slide is kind of the vision of Heap and the future of Heap, but I do want to talk more about where the web has come. So in the early days of the web, websites were not very interactive. They were mostly landing pages where you could get information about a business. I think everybody here knows that websites are becoming more intricate. They're becoming more embedded in our day-to-day lives, and we're actually doing things on these websites opposed to just viewing information. And with that comes more levels of complexity with how to analyze these web applications. Most of the clients that I talk to are focused on conversion rates. So how many people start by viewing my webpage and get through to my conversion event, and that drives revenue to my business? Or how are we retaining our customers? If a user interacts with our blog, or if a user interacts with some page on our webpage, are they more likely to come to our application over time and drive retention? So that is basically like layer one, which is how do we get this information? And Heap does a really great job at auto capturing literally every single event that happens on your webpage without you instrumenting any code. And that's kind of our secret sauce. But we want to take this a layer further with kind of what Larry was talking about by applying data science models to all this auto captured data to basically show you the things that you don't know about your product that your users are doing. There's a lot of inherent bias baked into funnel analysis of products because the product manager designed the actual process and expects the user to go through that. And amongst the hundreds of trials that we're running with this new suite of features, which is our Illuminate features, what users actually do looks a lot more like the left-hand path. And these are all the blind spots in your product that are actually helping adoption and retention and conversion. So Heap is trying to use all this auto-captured data and basically serve insights to you with data science.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Travis. Really insightful and resonates so much with what we do here at Intercom as well, and how we try and use data to inform those customer experiences. So just lastly, before we move into the simple texting use case of how all of these tools collaborate, and I think that's one of the key themes here of this webinar, is the changing tech stacks that companies use, interoperability is just critical now to choosing the right tools and getting the most value out of the right tools. And that's something at Intercom we're very aware of, is that you wouldn't buy Intercom in a silo. It's part of a tech stack where Intercom connects perfectly to your data from Heap or from your underlying data infrastructure in Amazon, and that they can all speak to each other. And again, just to speak a little bit more to what I said earlier, it's that multi-channel customer engagement layer, so that you can use these insights that you're gleaning from your data through Heap, that's being stored and served in real time by Amazon, and then you can drive that messaging experience that customers love and drive real business results as well. But what we're seeing on the Intercom side is so much of this is actually driven by customer expectations as well, with even over the last 10 years, the drive of social media, live messaging, instant messaging, and the expectation that is transferred the most preferred channel from email or phone to instant messaging. And that is one of the trends that's been critical for Intercom's growth as well. And I think that's something Intercom and SimpleTexting have in common as well, is that instant messaging and this direct messaging is so powerful from a customer experience point of view. Cool. So that is, I suppose, Intercom's piece in a nutshell. Now let's get into the meat of this webinar and look at examples of how this is all actually working in action. And Sean, you will be the star of the show here, so I'm happy to let you take the reins for much of this. But first, let's talk about campaigns, building, launching, and measuring campaigns. First, I guess before we even look into the ins and outs of those campaigns, when you're looking at your data, you have Heap, you have Amazon storing all your data, and you have Intercom to deliver the message. What is it you're looking to accomplish by using these services together, and what is it that you're trying to deliver for your business and for your customer as well?
Yeah, so a little background, right? So we sort of set out a year and a half ago or so, I guess, to sort of augment some of what we were doing, and our focus has always been on just how can we provide the best possible experience to our customers. And as part of this, it's really about ensuring that they get the information that they need, right, to help make a decision at the right time and as efficiently and quickly as possible. So, our goal was to deliver a more personalized experience, from the first time that they sort of hit our site through to, some of the events, some of the conversion events, right, starting a free trial, upgrading to paid, and then also through the rest of the life cycle. That was really sort of critical for us. And so this really sort of impacted, and was the driver of bringing these three services together for us around a better customer experience that would help us drive our business forward.
Awesome. So I guess you spoke about delivering personalized messages to your customers. Why is that important?
Yeah, so we see that when customers get the right information at the right time, in a more personal way, it helps them make a decision faster about whether sort of we are the right solution for them or not. Right. It may also help them see things that they wouldn't otherwise see within our application. Right. So a customer who comes in and is looking to send sort of more one-on-one messages, we know that if they spend time in our inbox, this is probably a sort of more business texting focused user, and we may deliver them a message around adding additional phone numbers or teammates, right, to encourage them to see more value in the beginning when they start using SimpleTexting.
Awesome. And I guess at a high level, what's happening here on your website for this, I guess, this conversion or this acquisition piece? What's happening in terms of how you're using Heap and how you're using Intercom? What's behind the scenes interplay here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, we've been heavy users of Intercom for sort of a long time. Our teams essentially live in Intercom, right? So, and as we started to look at sort of a new analytics platform, it was really key that we could use a lot of the sort of insights that we already had within Intercom, and that we could move data back and forth between these two to help us deliver a more personal experience, which is, why we ultimately landed with Heap. So, we use Intercom in a number of different ways through the customer lifecycle. We engage with website visitors, and we have a team of SDRs who are engaging in conversations actively with those. We use it, in the onboarding and through sort of lifecycle marketing, both email and in-app messaging. And it's our primary sort of customer support medium as well. Like I said, our support and success teams live inside of Intercom. And then Heap, as our sort of primary analytics platform, it allows us to see things that we may not even know that we should be looking at this point, which is, sort of to speak to Travis's, auto capture, right, is an amazing tool. And then what we do is we use these segments which we create within Heap. So as I mentioned before, in sort of the inbox example, we can look at, folks who have visited the inbox more than 5 times. We sort of know generally what they're trying to accomplish. We'll sync those, back into Intercom, which will allow us to deliver a message, very quickly to the user to drive them a little further down the funnel and hopefully allow them to, sort of reach that aha moment a little faster. And then, from an AWS perspective, it is just underpinning so much of what's happening here and allowing us to do this in the sort of real-time manner, which is really, really important to us, right? When our sort of business is focused around real-time message delivery, having the ability to deliver those messages to our customers in real time is key.
Amazing. Really, really insightful to hear all that and how they all play together as well. I suppose to focus on one, use case where you're using all these tools in unison is that acquisition piece that you mentioned. So I guess while we were preparing for this talk, I spent some time on your site, noticed that you had a number of different outbound message campaigns set up here. I guess contextual messages to where you are on the site and what you potentially are looking for. What's the thought process behind this, and sort of what's driving it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, contextual messaging is really important. And the goal here is to try and engage more people on our website. And if they're getting messages that are speaking to their particular need, they're more likely to engage. When they engage, they'll flow through a number of different paths. One of these, and sort of the strongest one for us, is having a live conversation with one of our SDRs, right? Which would allow us to determine what their needs are, whether we're a right fit, and potentially book a call with our sales team. They convert at much higher rates when they're speaking with our sales team, and we can generally, their adoption of the platform itself is much higher. We do offer sort of a self-serve flow, but depending on the use case, it's a much better experience for our customers. So we've created a lot of different types of contextual messaging. One of these is, on our blog articles. So oftentimes folks will land on our blog articles through search, right? And so we often know the sort of intent of some of that search. And so we'll deliver some contextual messages around the search, maybe show them how a particular feature works, right, in this messaging. And then another piece is, we know sort of when folks are visiting subsequent times, right? So they visited once and they're visiting a second or a third time, and we'll customize this message to sort of where they are in the journey. And again, that helps, just with better engagement rates with our customers overall to drive them forward to the next event and hopefully see more value in SimpleTexting. And then the last piece, right, is contextual messaging around some of our sort of competitive advantages, right? We have a really great suite of sort of integrations with SimpleTexting, and surfacing this early on, maybe something that a user may not have found otherwise. And sort of delivering these contextual messages has driven some pretty dramatic results for us. We were able to sort of increase our number of demos, right, by a little over 60% over the last couple of quarters, as we've started to really implement more of this contextual messaging that speaks to the user's very particular need.
Got it. And I guess just to lean on one of Larry's points earlier about AI and ML, there's a whole lot of automation going on here that I guess we assume maybe our audience kind of gets here, but I suppose just to dig into it a little bit, I see you're using bots here to do some maybe the initial light or heavy lifting for your sales team. You're using Heap to automatically trigger these messages as well. Would you be able to speak just a small bit to the automation piece here that you're using to drive like internal business efficiency as well?
Yeah, that's right. It would be lovely if every single person that came to the site had somebody speaking with them. It's just not possible, right? And so we rely really heavily on a lot of these automations, although with as much of a personal touch as we possibly can, and we try and get them to a human wherever it makes sense. But yeah, in the beginning, try and assess their needs through a bot, right? If we can answer a question there for someone, even better. So we're using segment synced from Heap to try and determine, that we've determined our sort of powerful ways of segmenting users and delivering the right message to them using Intercom's bot functionality to sort of move them further through various paths, right? And ultimately, hopefully, where that user wants to be.
Awesome.
Sean, I have a question.
Go ahead, Travis.
I hear a lot from clients that before using a product analytics tool or purpose-built tool, these segments can be really difficult to build. Could you just talk about like how quickly you go from ideation of a segment to actually deploying that on Intercom?
Yeah, it's really fast, right? So, and this is something that we'll talk a little bit more about later, but we identified, and I think this is a key piece early on, some of the sort of important events, and we continue to identify those as we go. And often these are surfaced, through Heap as well. And once we sort of defined one of those events, or then we can sort of add them into a segment and get up and running with these messages, literally in a matter of minutes sometimes. Because we have so much data already in Heap that's been captured. Even if we didn't know that we sort of needed to use this, it's there. It's easy to tag, get into a segment, push to Intercom, and get a message set up. It's really unbelievable.
Awesome. It's amazing to see how fast it all is, how it all plays together. When you think about tech stacks, how they play with each other, even half a decade ago, the speed in real time that you can just set up these campaigns and deploy and have impact is pretty outstanding. One of the things that you mentioned, Sean, was across the entire life cycle. So delivering value, not just at this acquisition piece, but moving beyond acquisition into onboarding and engagement and looking at current customers and using this model, this data model and Intercom for deployment to deliver value to your new customers as well. Would you be able to speak a little bit to that in terms of what you're trying to achieve at this stage of the life cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for us, we use sort of the jobs to be done framework, right? From, sort of for the onboarding piece that sort of comes after the initial interactions, right? And driving folks to make sure that they're getting all of the information to get their accounts sort of properly set up and get the most benefit of SimpleTexting. So we know sort of like the first actions that you should likely take, right, to sort of help to see that value as quickly as possible. And for us, that largely revolves around sort of sending that first message. So this is sort of one of the key pieces for us. So we have sort of a general onboarding flow that everyone is entered into. And then, sort of once they've sent that first text, then we sort of move them into various subflows. And this is where, sort of Heap really comes in. And we'll push a segment from Heap into Intercom, which, will enter them into one of these subflows to help deliver better contextual messaging, educate them around particular features. So sort of back to the example of the inbox, we may have identified that somebody's been to the inbox a few times, right? And then from there, we'll deliver them more information on how to use features of the inbox, right? And other things that will deliver value. We really look around, sort of what is the end goal for the user here, right? And, part of this is, we sort of if we're looking at the inbox, for example, right, we may be trying to get users to do, or we know that if they do certain things along the way, they'll see the most benefit. So we look at the end goal and we sort of work back there to create our messaging.
Awesome. And do you really, I suppose, just to tap a little bit further into it, what kind of, so you have your segments, you've got your wealth of data that's coming from AWS into Heap, into Intercom. You have your channels to reach your customers, and then you have your features, which is ultimately what you want your customers to engage with. What kind of tests do you run, and like what's available to you here to make sure something is more impactful than something else?
Yeah, so we'll do a number of different things there. One of these is, we do a lot of testing, right? So we'll try wherever possible to segment users into, various groups and provide, a different experience, and then we'll measure those experiences one against another, or we'll measure those who have seen an experience and those who have not seen an experience, right? And sort of what the conversion rates are like along the way. Are they realizing more value having seen that message, right, and taking more action based on it? So, and we'll measure it in a number of ways. So we'll use, some of the, if it's sort of like a one action item, then sometimes we'll use the sort of measurements within Intercom. Oftentimes we'll then go back and we'll look at segment, right, or sorry, Heap, and we'll look at how the various segments have performed, right, from those who have seen or may not have seen the experience. And we can really dig in and find a lot of information within Heap.
Awesome. So it's sort of a virtuous cycle then, in terms of getting insights, bringing them back and recycling them into something more optimized as well.
That's right. And then we can iterate on it sort of very quickly, at that point. If something's worked, we'll sort of double down on that. If something isn't working, we'll go back to the drawing board, adjust and go again. And the nice thing is we can do those things very quickly, right? It doesn't have to spend a lot of time, going through a cycle to get it back into sort of production land.
100%. And I suppose, speaking of that measurement piece and that optimization piece, one of the figures that we pulled out from our conversation before was this increase in adoption rate of teammates and multi-number features by 27%, which to anyone who works, I guess, in feature adoption is a very significant improvement. Would you be able to speak a little bit more to how you evaluate the impact of your campaigns, and I suppose what's playing a role here in terms of like examples and the data that you're using?
Yeah, so to speak to this particular example, right? This has sort of been a focus for us over the last year or so, and we started building some messaging from in Intercom, using segments from Heap to direct users to adopting these two sort of features, right? And by going back and measuring the sort of segments, those again who have seen or not seen, right? And just the overall sort of conversion on users, right? We've seen that it's driven massive increases in our adoption of these particular features. So primarily we're using the data from Heap to be able to measure sort of pre and post messaging delivery, and then the various segments within that.
Amazing. I suppose, Travis, do you want to pry into that a little bit more in terms of how that's done, or open the floor a little bit?
So I see this a lot, right? I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients throughout the course of the year, and I always am curious as to how did you discover this, Sean? Like, how did you know that these are the features that you wanted to increase adoption? Is that something you used Heap to do, or was that used on intuition or client engagements?
Yeah, so initially this was sort of a business-driven decision, right, where we knew that we wanted to go after this. But then as we started to dig into the data within Heap, we started to learn more around the users who had adopted. We could see the various paths they took, through that adoption. So we knew some of the critical things that we needed users to do, right, to drive adoption. So that really helped us build in some of the messaging and identify those key areas of opportunity for us, because we had data that we didn't really know we needed in a lot of ways.
Okay, so you you essentially ran some type of conversion, and then you cohorted your users into users who have interacted with this thing or this thing or this thing, and you found that people interacted with one specific thing adopted at a higher rate, and then you targeted them.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Amazing how specific we can get. Okay, so moving on to that's everything that you're doing right now, which is a hell of a lot. But speaking to what you're planning to do next, in terms of what are the opportunities that you see in the immediate term for SimpleTexting to drive into?
Yeah, so we think that there's still a lot of opportunity here. We really feel like we're only sort of scratching the surface on all of the things that we could be doing. And as we learn more about sort of our users and get all of this data, we think that there's a lot more journeys that we can help people achieve better results with. So we want to launch more campaigns. Just speaking to sort of the inbox, the team, the users piece. Something that we're actively talking about launching, sort of like there's like 8 new pieces of this campaign, which we'll be launching very, very soon, which is exciting because it will only take us a few days to do this sort of as we set out on this path. And then looking at, other opportunities, how do we incorporate more of this further in the life cycle, right? So, if a customer's been with us for a year, how can we deliver meaningful campaigns to them that may, increase adoption at SimpleTexting? And then I think, just overall, leaning more into the contextual messaging, right? As part of these campaigns, there's a lot more that can be done there as we segment our user journeys more. And then the last one is a sort of a really interesting piece for us. And it's sort of, came out of a bit of a side project, which is using Heap to develop a bit of a lead scoring model. And with the sort of connection between Heap and Intercom, we can tell some key pieces, right, early on in a user journey, right, from the first time that they come to the site. And we can create a lead scoring model within Heap essentially and push that data that our SDR team and our experts can then use right within Intercom as they're having active conversations with people. Help prioritize some conversations, give us a little bit more context as we're starting to interact with people for the first time.
Awesome. Yeah, really interested in that lead scoring model. It's something that we spend a little bit of time thinking about at Intercom as well. And if you're open to it, we'll definitely love to pick your brain if you develop anything on that side as well.
We'll keep our fingers crossed that it works, and we're definitely happy to share.
Awesome.
Sean, that is a tremendous case study example. I'm very curious at your future plans in terms, particularly in the messaging space, what you look like as what you see as the leading contextual pieces of data. What is most impactful? Because it's a fascinating channel and you guys are doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Larry. So as far as what's most impactful from a contextual, I think just it really depends on the user journey in a lot of ways, right? Sort of which message will resonate most. And I think we're still trying to figure that out in a lot of cases, right? I think, as we get to know more about our users.
Awesome. Are there any trends, Larry, do you think that we could be, that SimpleTexting or indeed any of us could be leaning into here that you see happening on the data side?
I think the case study illuminates it, as well as some of the things you mentioned before, is about the orchestration. So I think there's the power. I was curious particularly in the messaging platforms, how you orchestrate and coordinate across these channels, because that's where I think we're 1 and 1 equals 3 or more in terms of having the consumer have an experience that is curated and orchestrated, because everyone in today's world lives in a multi-channel universe. Though I think the open rates in text messaging make it incredibly clear how powerful a medium and channel this is.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It is, sorry. So, it is interesting there, right? And it is something that we think a lot about, how we deliver, what type of message we're delivering as well, right? So whether it's an in-app message to a user who's active, whether it's an email or a text message ourselves, is really dependent on where someone is in the journey.
I suppose another one to open to the floor as well is things that we might do differently based on everything that we've learned so far from this multi-channel experience, building these experiences. Still, still quite early days in terms of how this is all orchestrated, as you said, Larry. So yeah, I guess, Sean, it'd be great to hear what are the things that you may have, if it was me starting out in the exact same journey as you were on, what are the things that you might give me a heads up on?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely a few lessons learned, right? And some things that we're probably doing better now than we did in the beginning. And one of those is just really investing in the proper setup in the beginning, which can be sort of really difficult to gather the resources to do this. But the sooner you can get the setup properly done, the sooner you can start to use those insights and to get it going. And so part of this for us was, as we got Heap up and running, which is very sort of easy to do initially, we also decided or discovered that we really wanted to augment some of this with our own data, and so that took a little bit of additional time. Sort of once we sort of came to this realization to get that done. So that's something that I would plan for in the beginning, right? Just so you can start to get more value very, very quickly. It's certainly not necessary. It's a bit more of a nice to have, but it definitely increased the power of what we were doing. And then the second piece is, just knowing more about our customers' goals, right? Using that sort of jobs to be done framework, what actions should folks be taking, and then how can we nurture those actions along the way, and really doing a great sort of mapping of that in the beginning. Although I'll tell you, you will surface things along the way, sort of after using Heap that you didn't even really need to go, or you didn't know you needed to know. But having a framework is really critical. And then for us, this is really important to us as well, is great cross-functional alignment. So with some of these tools, we have products, marketing, development sort of participating in and making sure that there's some coordination and great collaboration between all of those teams from the outset. Is very, very impactful.
Awesome. I think that cross-functional alignment piece definitely is one that resonates when you have so many different teams, different use cases, potentially different preferences as well in terms of what they might use to get their job done. Getting that cross-functional alignment is much harder than it sounds in I suppose 3.5 words. I suppose what are there any extra I suppose nuggets within that in terms of, say, one team is using Intercom and another team is using another service, or the same with Heap, or the same with Amazon Web Services? What is it that allows teams to kind of streamline and make sure that they're making the most efficient and high velocity decisions for their business?
Yeah, I think for us, it's getting some of those folks in a room and really determining sort of what the goals are. What are you trying to achieve with these different tools together, and then from there, some ownership, right, on who's going to sort of guide the ship. But that goals piece is really key, so everyone can stay bought into the sort of larger vision that we're trying to achieve, and how these tools sort of play a part in that.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, we're actually at the end of your use case study now, Sean, so we can put it to the greater floor of our many attendees who are listening at the moment. So I will dig into the questions now that my colleague has prepared from the chat. If you do have any more questions for Sean, Larry, or Travis, please do ask in the chat, and we'll be there hopefully to answer everything here in person over the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and quickly get the chat conversations up. Cool, so SimpleTexting, a very direct question for you, Sean, to begin with. What is the pricing model for SimpleTexting in terms of tracked users, license seats, etc.?
Got it. Yeah. So for us, we work on sort of a volume basis, right? So the number of text messages that you need to send on a monthly or annual basis, and then there is some per seat, right, when you get up into a higher number of seats.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Is it possible to integrate SimpleTexting with Intercom, such as sending and replying to SMS messages from Intercom? That might be a thorny one.
Yeah, it is a bit of a thorny one. There are some things that you can do, right? It's not something that it's not an arena that we really play in so much, but we do integrate with sort of, a number of different things that can help deliver messages. We do have a Zapier integration as well, which, may be helpful there.
Perfect. Another question. I understand personalization is the way to go, but I also want to know, where do we draw the line between extreme personalization to add a little bit of professionalism? And this is a question from somebody who works in customer support specifically.
Yeah, so for us, I think we're really cognizant of this. We try, certainly not to cross that line, because there is a line, right, where it goes from being helpful to being something else, right? And so we try and use insights where appropriate to deliver better messaging without sort of crossing that line. And that's, I think, a bit of an individual thing, and something that, it's a much bigger existential question, I think, as well. It
is, and I guess every generation has a different level of comfort as well. So depends on who your audience is as well.
Yeah, and Liam, I'd like to add to that. I think Sean, you're spot on. And I think that's where the rise of machine learning to help discern some of those patterns, to learn when users, especially across channels, are unhappy with the communication. And that bi-directional back to the data later, we can change and take users out of different messages because we've learned they don't want to hear this. But I think you're spot on, Sean.
Yes, that's a very powerful use case, Larry, and something that we definitely get value from at Intercom. So I might actually follow up on that in terms of how we might be able to do that here ourselves. Another direct question: is the Intercom Heap integration something that you need to pay for? I believe if you pay for both services, you can connect the Heap app free of charge. Travis, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so how Heap works, I'll just kind of explain it. Pricing model is based on sessions, so the raw amount of volume that Heap ingests, basically. We don't charge for user licenses. Anybody can have a login. Heap also doesn't charge for any data that you send into the system. So ingesting raw Intercom events, totally fine. We do have add-ons for data out integration. So building a segment within Heap and then sending it to a destination like Intercom would be something that we would charge for.
I'll keep it on you, Travis, while I have you. Currently, a customer is using Mixpanel as their product analytics software. What would be the main benefit of moving to Heap over Mixpanel?
Great question. I love this one. And as you kind of dive deeper into the product analytics space, there's really two schools of thought, where you have some tools that basically make it so that you have to pre-think of every query that you'd ever want to run. This is inherently really, really challenging. You're not going to know 6 months down the road that this specific blog post might have a higher influence in conversion or this specific feature. So you would actually have to sit down with your product team and explicitly think about tracking these things beforehand. Now, the nice thing about Heap is you don't necessarily have to do that, because we do auto capture everything that happens throughout time since Heap has been installed. So you can essentially look back in time and these events will be defined. It's kind of a hard concept to understand when I talk about it, but when you actually see how the tool works, I think it makes a whole lot more sense. So the key here is the insights that you could get in Mixpanel on net new events will take you like 5 minutes to get within Heap, and it could take you up to a month to do it in Mixpanel, because you have to instrument the event and then wait for data collection.
Thanks, Travis. I'm sure that was a very helpful answer to the customer. A question for you, Sean, regarding contextual messaging. When sending user messages inside the website through Intercom and using email and in-app channels, what's the best way to balance the amount of messages that you send to a user, which I think for many customers is the million-dollar question: how much is too much and how little is too little?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. And it's something that we think about a lot as well, right? So we try and limit the number of messages that we're sort of sending to users, especially, right? But we also want to make sure that they're getting all of the information they need to take the next action, to make a decision, and to sort of see value from the platform itself. So there is a sort of tricky balance there, and we will monitor things like unsubscribe rates, right, open rates, different things that would indicate, right, whether a user is happy receiving those messages, or maybe a little unhappy because we bombarded them with too many things. On the site, sort of in the lead stage, I would say that we're a little bit more open. We also try not to sort of overwhelm, but we probably have a few more messages sort of during that stage, looking to engage with folks, as long as it's contextual and still meaningful.
Perfect. And while I still have you, a quick follow-on question. One of our attendees is very interested in learning about the Jobs to be Done framework, which you mentioned earlier on. They've read a couple of blogs, but do you have any particular resources that you would recommend to adopt this framework?
I don't have any particular resources just off the top of my head. It's become sort of, so ubiquitous in our sort of day-to-day, just talking about the jobs to be done. But I'm happy to ask my team and see whether there's anything in particular that they use that would be helpful, and we can always share that out.
Perfect. I think Intercom has a book on it. It might be a little bit outdated by now, but I'll always recommend a piece of Intercom content as well. Trying to think, because we also use the Jobs to be Done framework at Intercom as well. So it's sort of ingrained in how we think and how we approach lifecycle marketing as well. And I think Clayton Christensen is the brain person of it, so definitely a person to check out if he has any more deep materials on the Jobs to be Done framework. Thanks a million, Sean. So another question, localization. How do you see localized content and messages add to the effectiveness of user engagement and happiness? So I suppose this could apply to both SimpleTexting messaging and Intercom messaging. So again, just the question, how does localized content add to the effectiveness of user engagement or user happiness?
Yeah, so I think localization is certainly important, right? And it's something that we do use on the site as well, right? In delivering messaging, to make sure that it's delivered to at the right time to the right person, and based on a number of different factors, localization being one of them. Make sure that we can offer the right service to that user, right? Guide them down the particular path that's best for them.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd completely echo that as well in terms of how we message customers at Intercom. If their location or if their language or if any of those details are pertinent or relevant to the message, then absolutely it's going to increase engagement. You may not just do it for the sake of it, you may do it because it's relevant to the message that you're trying to deliver as well. So if it helps be contextual, then it's valuable, yeah, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a couple of more questions here. Did you measure the size of your audience when you compare text messaging to email? And did you study the rate of unsubscribing of text versus email? So someone's trying to dig in and a little bit more on how these channels compare. I wouldn't expect you to have this off the top of your head. So
yeah. I will say, we have definitely studied sort of email versus text messaging in general. They both serve a place in the world still. We're not anti-email by any stretch of the imagination. We see them being sort of very complementary in a lot of ways. A lot of our customers will use both of the channels, right? One to augment the other. They'll reach different audiences. So we really do see them working together in a lot of ways. Generally, with text messaging, because it's a very opt-in channel, right? You have to agree to receive text messages, especially sort of mass text messages. Unsubscribe rates, if you're sending good messaging, are very, very low, right? Conversion rate is very, very high on them. So that's sort of the case that we use for text messaging. Is that it's oftentimes delivered and opened more quickly, right? So there's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely, and I guess just to continue the theme of the webinar, it's all about the context, right? Sometimes there's the context for email, and then globally with SimpleTexting, and if SMS fail to deliver, how does that credits. So again, very specific questions.
Yeah, yeah. So primarily in the US and Canada for the most part. And as far as it depends on sort of the reason for failure, right? But you know, if it's generally it will still use a credit, right? If we try to deliver a message and it's a good phone number, you know, that would use a credit. If it's an invalid phone number for some reason, then you know, it would remove that contact from future messaging and wouldn't use credits.
Awesome, perfect. Okay, I think that's just about all we have time for. If you do have any more questions that are in the chat that we didn't get back to, we'll try and distribute them and cover them offline, or well, online, but off this video. But thank you everybody for attending this webinar. Hopefully you found it useful. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Larry and Travis, for your time. It's been really valuable to hear all of your experiences and your thoughts on digital customer experiences. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem. See you again. Bye.